They spat on the janitor's hands, and the Mafia Boss burned the ballroom. The wet, degrading sound of spit hitting aged skin cuts through the elegant music. The air of a rival family laughs, casually wiping the scuff from his designer shoe directly onto the trembling hands of an elderly janitor. The grand ballroom in Florence reeks of excessive French perfumes and well-dressed lies. Above them, the light from the crystal chandeliers is blinding, as if trying to hide the absolute filth standing right underneath them. Exactly 2 meters away, Dante Medici stands perfectly still. The air around him freezes, heavy with his presence, a dark blend of ancient cedar, expensive leather, and the metallic aroma of cold cigar smoke. He does not shout. He simply watches the crystal champagne flute in his hand splinter and crack under the terrifying pressure of his fingers. They thought she was just the floor they walked on, but Dante Medici saw in her the only pure thing in that ballroom of snakes. The blood slowly drips from the cracked crystal in Dante's hand, falling onto the pristine marble floor. It is a microscopic detail, entirely unnoticed by the hundreds of elites swirling through the grand ballroom. They are too busy drinking imported champagne, calculating alliances, and trading hollow flatteries. The atmosphere is suffocating, thick with the scent of excessive French perfumes and well-dressed lies. Dante despises this room. He despises the men who wear tailored tuxedos to mask the fact that they are nothing more than well-funded parasites. He slowly rotates the heavy gold signet ring on his right ring finger. It is a slow, methodical gesture. To anyone paying attention, it is the only warning sign before a catastrophic storm. But no one in the room is paying attention to the Don of Florence. They believe his silence is a sign of passive observation. They do not realize it is the silence of a predator, calculating the exact angle of the kill. The jarring, chaotic noise of the gala stands in violent contrast to the profound silence Dante experienced just 12 hours earlier. That morning, before the sun had fully breached the Tuscan horizon, Dante had been at the Santa Croce Cemetery. The fog rolling off the Arno River had been freezing and absolute. There were no fake smiles there. There were no political maneuvers. There was only a simple marble headstone and the agonizing, crushing weight of reality. He had knelt in the damp earth, exactly as he did every Friday. He had taken off his armor, stripped away his titles, and spent an hour sitting with the ghost of his 4-year-old son. Marco had died of a fever 2 years ago, a biological failure that all the money and power in the Medici Empire could not prevent. That loss had fundamentally rewired Dante's soul. It had taught him the bitter difference between authority and true power. Authority is forcing men to kneel in a ballroom. Power is the ability to protect the vulnerable from the dark. Dante had failed to protect his son. He would never fail to protect the innocent again. He had left the cemetery carrying a heavy, silent grief. He brought that silence with him into the glittering, superficial chaos of the evening's gala. For the past 2 hours, Dante had stood near the grand pillars, observing the hierarchy of the room. He watched the rival dons. He watched their spoiled, arrogant heirs. And he watched Lucia. Lucia is the elderly janitor tasked with keeping the ballroom immaculate. She wears a simple, faded grey uniform that marks her as entirely invisible to the wealthy guests. She moves along the edges of the room with a mop and a bucket, her back slightly hunched from decades of hard labor. Dante had watched her long before the rival heir approached her. He noticed the quiet, meticulous care she took in her work. He noticed the way she respectfully averted her eyes when the elites walked past, not out of fear, but out of a deeply ingrained, silent dignity. She possesses no wealth. She commands no soldiers. She holds absolutely no power in the Florentine underworld. Yet, in the way she carries herself, Dante sees an honor that is completely absent in the billionaires surrounding him. The men in the tailored suits steal from each other, lie to their wives, and murder their rivals for a fraction of a percent in shipping routes. Lucia simply cleans the floor, asking for nothing, maintaining her integrity in a world designed to crush it. Dante rotates the gold signet ring again. The contrast burns in his chest. The elite guests represent everything that is wrong with the syndicate. They are predators who feed on the weak. They believe that power gives them the divine right to inflict cruelty without consequence. Dante's eyes remain locked on the young, arrogant heir who just spat on Lucia's hands. The young man is still laughing, turning to his sycophantic friends to share the joke. He believes he has just demonstrated his superiority. He believes he has established dominance by humiliating a woman who cannot fight back. He has no idea that he has just signed his own death warrant. Dante does not reach for the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. He does not signal Luca and his guards to move in. He waits. Dante is never impulsive. He understands that true destruction requires the perfect stage. He waits for the precise moment of maximum emotional impact to strike. The crystal glass in his hand finally shatters completely, the delicate shards digging deeper into his palm. He does not feel the pain. He only feels the heavy, metallic aroma of his own cigar smoke freezing the air around him. The storm has finished gathering. Now it is time to break. The string quartet in the corner of the ballroom plays a flawless, sweeping waltz. It is a piece composed centuries ago for royalty, designed to echo off marble walls and elevate the souls of those who hear it. Tonight, the music only serves as a beautiful, mocking mask over an ugly, rotting reality. The heir of the Corsi family stands in the center of the blinding light cast by the crystal chandeliers. His tailored tuxedo is cut from midnight blue silk, a garment worth more than the entire building where the janitor, Lucia, sleeps. He holds a fresh glass of imported champagne, his face flushed with the arrogance of a boy who has never been told no. He had just spat directly onto the elderly woman's hands, wiping the minor scuff from his polished leather shoe onto her frail, trembling skin. His friends, a circle of equally entitled, wealthy parasites, erupt into low, cruel laughter. They swirl their drinks, looking down at the woman kneeling on the floor as if she were an insect that had dared to crawl across their pristine path. Lucia does not look up. She does not scream. She does not throw her wet mop water onto the heir's expensive trousers. She remains entirely silent. She slowly pulls a grey, frayed rag from the pocket of her faded uniform. Her hands are a map of her difficult existence. The skin is thin, heavily lined, and permanently stained by decades of harsh cleaning chemicals, cold water, and relentless labor. She wipes the spit from her own hand with a quiet, devastating dignity. Then, she leans forward and begins to wipe the marble floor around the heir's feet, ensuring his path is completely spotless. The retention loop of her silence hangs heavily in the air. Why does she not react? In a room filled with predators, the prey knows that sudden movement brings death. Lucia is an invisible woman in a world run by monsters. She understands the brutal, unspoken mathematics of the syndicate. If she defends her honor, she will lose her employment by morning. If she offends the heir in front of his peers, she might lose her life by midnight. The elites in this room have ordered executions for far less than an insult from a servant. Her silence is not cowardice. It is the absolute, terrifying discipline of survival. She swallows her pride so she can afford to eat the next day. 2 meters away, Dante Medici watches her. He stands in the periphery of the light, half submerged in the shadows of the grand pillars. The blood from the shattered crystal glass has already dried in the deep creases of his palm. He does not feel it. The physical pain is completely eclipsed by the cold, calculated fury crystallizing in his chest. Dante slowly rotates the heavy gold signet ring on his right ring finger. The metal grinds against his skin. It is a slow, methodical gesture. It is the only physical manifestation of the violence building inside him. The air around him grows unnaturally static, heavy with the scent of ancient cedar, expensive leather, and the metallic aroma of his cold cigar smoke. The men standing near Dante unconsciously step away, driven back by the invisible, freezing pressure of his presence, even though he has not spoken a single word. Why does Dante simply observe? Why does the Lion of Florence, a man who dictates the fate of the city, Allow a spoiled heir to humiliate an innocent woman in his territory. Dante is never impulsive. He understands the architecture of destruction better than anyone in the Italian underworld. If he steps forward now and strikes the Corsi heir, the room will simply see a brief, chaotic scuffle. They will whisper that the Don of Florence lost his temper over a spilled drink and a dirty floor. The Corsi family would demand a sit-down, citing a breach of diplomatic respect. But Dante does not want an apology. He wants absolute, undeniable ruin. To completely destroy an enemy in the syndicate, you must allow them to dig their own grave in front of an audience. You must give them enough rope to hang themselves. Dante waits because he is letting the Corsi heir reveal his true, pathetic nature to the rest of the families. He is letting the tension in the room build until it becomes a physical weight. He waits for the moment of maximum emotional impact, the exact second where the boy's arrogance transitions from a minor offense into an unforgivable sin. The Corsi heir is completely oblivious to the predator watching him. Drunk on champagne and the toxic validation of his friends, he decides that a single moment of degradation is not enough. He craves a spectacle. The heir takes a step back. He looks at a silver ice bucket resting on a nearby marble table. With a cruel, deliberate smirk, he lifts his polished shoe and kicks the heavy bucket over. The sound of the metal crashing against the floor shatters the elegant illusion of the waltz. Chunks of ice and freezing water spill across the pristine marble, pooling directly around Lucia's knees. The freezing water seeps instantly into the thin fabric of her uniform. "You missed a spot." The heir slurs, his voice carrying over the music, demanding the attention of the surrounding guests. "You people are paid to be invisible. If you are going to force us to look at you, the least you can do is learn how to scrub properly." The ballroom goes entirely still. The music falters for a fraction of a second before the musicians nervously resume playing. The surrounding dons, the politicians, and the wealthy wives stop their conversations. They turn their heads. The atmosphere shifts from superficial celebration to the suffocating tension of a public execution. They watch the elderly woman shivering on the wet marble, surrounded by ice. Lucia does not weep. Her jaw tightens. The profound humiliation settles over her fragile shoulders, yet her internal spine remains made of steel. She lowers her head further. She places her bare, scarred hands into the freezing puddle of ice water. She begins to gather the cubes, placing them slowly back into the overturned silver bucket. Her fingers turn a pale, bruised blue from the cold. The Corsi heir laughs again, a harsh, grating sound that echoes off the crystal chandeliers. He believes he is a king demonstrating his power. He does not know he is a dead man performing his final act. Dante's thumb stops, rotating the gold ring. The slow, methodical warning has ended. The room has witnessed the cruelty. The evidence of the Corsi family's dishonor has been perfectly, undeniably displayed. The heir has proven that his bloodline is arrogant, weak, and devoid of the fundamental respect required to sit at the high tables of Florence. Dante lowers his bleeding hand to his side. The scent of cedar and metallic smoke thickens, an atmospheric shift, indicating that the time for observation is over. The tension in the ballroom has reached its absolute peak, stretched so tight that the air itself feels ready to shatter. The Don of Florence begins to walk toward the center of the light. The sea of tailored suits and silk gowns parts in absolute silence. Dante Medici does not ask the crowd to move. They simply feel the sudden, crushing drop in the room's temperature and step back instinctively. His footsteps on the polished marble are slow and deliberate, echoing softly under the waltz that the string quartet is desperately trying to maintain. As Dante walks toward the center of the blinding chandelier light, the heavy scent of ancient cedar and metallic cigar smoke pushes the sickening aroma of excessive French perfumes out of the way. The Corsi heir, still holding his imported champagne, turns to see the Don of Florence approaching. The young man's face is flushed with alcohol and misplaced confidence. He misreads the situation entirely. He believes Dante is walking over to share in the amusement, to validate the hierarchy of the room by standing beside another man of wealth. The heir even raises his glass a fraction of an inch, a silent, arrogant toast to the king of the syndicate. Dante does not look at the boy's face. He looks down at the floor. Lucia is still kneeling in the freezing puddle of ice water. Her faded grey uniform is soaked through, clinging to her fragile frame. Her bare, scarred hands are submerged, slowly gathering the scattered ice cubes and placing them back into the overturned silver bucket. As Dante stares down at her, the flawless strategic machinery of his mind begins to process a series of buried details. He knows the architecture of his empire down to the last stone. He knows the faces of the men who kill for him, and he knows the names of the people who serve his house. He recognizes her. The first wave of revelation hits him quietly. Lucia is not just a nameless contractor hired by the event staff. She is a relic of the old Medici system. Decades ago, before Dante took the throne, his father ran a series of orphanages in the poorer districts of Florence. Lucia was one of those orphans when the system was restructured and the property sold. She never asked for a payout. She never demanded a pension. She simply folded into the background, taking menial cleaning jobs in the properties owned by the syndicate. She is, by the ancient laws of their world, a subject of the Medici crest. She is someone his family was sworn to protect, someone who had slipped through the cracks of their vast bureaucracy, yet remained entirely loyal, asking for absolutely nothing in return. But it is the second detail that stops Dante's heart from beating for a fraction of a second. He looks closer at her hands. The skin is ruined by harsh bleach and decades of hot water, yes. But across the tips of her fingers and the base of her thumbs, there is a distinct pattern of tiny, healed puncture wounds. Calloused micro scars. The unmistakable marks of rose thorns. The waltz in the background seems to fade into a hollow, distant hum. The crowded ballroom, the blinding chandeliers, and the arrogant air vanish completely from Dante's perception. He is suddenly transported back to the freezing, damp earth of the Santa Croce Cemetery. Every Friday at dawn, for 2 agonizing years, Dante had arrived at his 4-year-old son's grave. He had always found the marble headstone clean, the dead leaves swept away. And every single week, without fail, there was a fresh arrangement of white roses resting against the stone. The stems were always perfectly trimmed. The thorns were always carefully handled. Dante had assumed it was the work of the cemetery groundskeeper. He had assumed his own investigator. Luca was paying someone to maintain the site. But Luca only handled security perimeters. And the groundskeeper was a man who rarely left his shed before noon. Dante stares at the tiny puncture wounds on Lucia's freezing hands. The truth crashes into him with the devastating force of a physical blow. It is her. This elderly, invisible woman, who makes minimum wage scrubbing the filth from the floors of the Florentine elite, is the one. She takes her meager earnings, buys fresh white roses, and walks to the cemetery in the freezing dawn before her shift begins. She kneels in the damp earth, trims the thorns, and tends to the resting place of a boy she never even met. In a world where Dante is surrounded by men who demand money, territory, and blood for their loyalty, this janitor offers her absolute devotion for free. She is the only person in the world who speaks to Marco besides Dante. She brings life and dignity to the cold stone where Dante's heart is permanently buried. She protects his son's memory in the dark, and the courtier just spat on the exact hands that care for Marco Medici. The realization does not make Dante lose control. It does the exact opposite. It refines his fury into a weapon of absolute, terrifying precision. The blood of the Corsi family is suddenly worth less than the dirty water soaking Lucia's uniform. The heir kicked ice over the only pure soul in Florence, simply because he believed her existence was beneath him. Dante comes to a complete halt right in front of the heir and the kneeling woman. The courtier smiles, swirling his champagne. He opens his mouth to speak, ready to offer a cruel, entitled comment about the incompetence of the help. Dante does not rotate his ring. He does not move. He stands with the posture of a king who has just decided to burn a city to the ground. The silence that falls over the immediate circle of guests is unnatural, heavy with the paralyzing realization that they are no longer at a gala. They are standing at ground zero. The string quartet finally stops playing. The bow of the lead violinist hovers silently over the strings, trembling slightly as the musician realizes the absolute shift in the room's atmosphere. The courtier stands over the freezing puddle, holding his imported champagne. He looks at Dante Medici, completely misinterpreting the lethal stillness of the Don. The young man believes he is sharing a moment of aristocratic solidarity with the most powerful man in Italy. They drag mud into our sanctuaries, Don Medici. The courtier slurs smoothly, offering a charismatic, hollow smile. He gestures loosely with his glass toward the elderly woman still kneeling at his feet. It is exhausting, is it not? Reminding them where they belong. Dante does not smile. He does not nod. He looks at the heir's face. Dante's eyes are devoid of any recognizable human warmth. They are the eyes of a coroner staring at a corpse on a steel table. The Don of Florence does not raise his voice. He does not need to shout to command the room. His tone drops into a low, resonating hum that carries through the absolute quiet of the grand ballroom, slicing through the heavy scent of French perfumes. "You do not know where she belongs," Dante says quietly. The heir's charismatic smile falters. The alcohol in his blood suddenly feels like ice. He looks around the immediate circle, searching for his sycophantic friends, but they have all taken a terrified step back. They recognize the tone. They recognize the metallic scent of cigar smoke and impending ruin. Dante ignores the heir completely. He steps forward, his polished, custom-made leather shoe entering the freezing puddle of ice water. He does not care about the ruin of his clothing. He does not care about the hundreds of elites watching him. With slow, deliberate grace, Dante Medici lowers his massive frame. A collective, silent shockwave ripples through the ballroom. The dons, the politicians, and the wealthy wives hold their breath, paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what they are witnessing. The king of the Florentine syndicate, a man who dictates the rise and fall of entire bloodlines, is bending his knee. He is kneeling on the wet, dirty marble floor directly in front of an elderly, invisible janitor. Lucia's head is bowed. She is shivering uncontrollably from the ice water soaking her faded grey uniform. She expects the blow. She expects the Don to join in the humiliation, to enforce the cruel hierarchy of their world. Instead, a large, warm hand enters her field of vision. Dante reaches out. His hands are calloused, heavily scarred from decades of violence and survival. Yet, his touch is impossibly gentle. He places his fingers beneath Lucia's freezing, wet hands and slowly lifts them from the ice. He looks at the fragile, aged skin. He looks at the spit drying on her knuckles, left there by the arrogant boy standing above them, and he looks at the tiny, healed puncture wounds from the white rose thorns. The thorns from his son's grave. Dante reaches into the breast pocket of his dark suit. He withdraws a pristine, perfectly folded silk handkerchief bearing the embroidered crest of the Medici family. It is a piece of fabric worth more than a month of Lucia's wages. He wraps the silk around her trembling fingers. With quiet, profound reverence, Dante begins to clean her hand. He wipes away the freezing water. He wipes away the degrading spit of the courtier. He treats her scarred, battered hands as if they are the most sacred relics in all of Italy. Because, to him, they are. They are the hands that care for Marco in the dark. Lucia slowly raises her head, her faded eyes, filled with decades of quiet suffering and absolute dignity, meet the dark, tempestuous gaze of the Mafia Boss. She does not understand why the most dangerous man in the city is kneeling in her dirty mop water. "Don Medici," she whispers, her voice trembling, terrified that she is committing a fatal offense simply by letting him touch her. "You are ruining your clothes. Please, I am just... You are the only pure thing in this room." Dante interrupts softly, his voice a gentle anchor in the freezing chaos. He finishes cleaning her skin. He folds the ruined silk handkerchief and places it back into his own pocket, keeping the insult the courtier delivered to her as his own personal debt to collect. Dante keeps one hand wrapped protectively around hers. He looks directly into her eyes. "I know what you do on Friday mornings, Lucia," Dante whispers, ensuring the words are for her ears only. "I know about the white roses. I know you sit with my boy when I cannot be there." Lucia's breath catches. A single tear escapes her eye, tracing a warm path down her wrinkled cheek. She had never asked for recognition. She had never sought a reward from the Medici Empire. She simply tended the grave because a child should never sleep in a forgotten bed. "He likes the white ones." Lucia murmurs softly, the profound, tragic intimacy of their shared grief binding them together in the center of the glittering room. Dante's jaw tightens. The phantom pain of his son's death aches in his chest, but it is no longer a paralyzing cold. It is a fierce, protective fire. He slowly stands up, bringing Lucia with him. He supports her frail weight, ensuring she stands completely upright, no longer bowed before the predators of the ballroom. Dante turns his head. He looks back at the courtier. The silence in the grand ballroom is no longer just quiet. It is absolute. It is a physical, suffocating pressure, pressing down on the chests of every guest present. It is the weight of a storm about to extinguish all the lights of Florence. The courtier is completely pale. The champagne glass in his hand is shaking violently. He finally understands the catastrophic error he has made. He did not just spit on a janitor. He spat on a woman under the direct, intimate protection of the Lion of Florence. Dante does not draw a weapon. He does not strike the boy. Violence would be too brief, too merciful. He looks at the air with a cold, absolute certainty that is far more terrifying than the barrel of a gun. The boy is already a ghost. He just does not know it yet. The grand ballroom of the palazzo is a monument to wealth and power. It is a place where alliances are forged in whispered conversations and enemies are made with a single misplaced word. Tonight, however, it is the stage for a public execution. Dante Medici does not hold a gun. He holds the trembling, calloused hand of Lucia, the elderly janitor, keeping her standing upright in the center of the freezing puddle of ice water. The violent, devastating contrast between the frail woman and the towering, heavily scarred Don of Florence is absolute. The string quartet remains entirely silent. The hundreds of guests are paralyzed, their champagne glasses frozen mid-air, suffocating under the heavy, metallic scent of Dante's cigar smoke and impending ruin. The courtier stands 2 meters away. His designer tuxedo suddenly feels like a shroud. The arrogant, cruel smile has completely vanished from his flushed face, replaced by the pale, hollow realization of a boy who has just stepped off a cliff in the dark. He looks at Dante's dark, tempestuous eyes and understands, with absolute certainty, that he has made a catastrophic, fatal error. He tries to speak. He tries to offer an apology, to claim it was a misunderstanding, a joke fueled by expensive alcohol. His mouth opens, but the dry, terrified rasp that escapes his throat is completely ignored by the Lion of Florence. Dante slowly turns his head. He looks toward the massive, intricately carved oak doors at the entrance of the ballroom. "Luca," Dante says. The single word is a low, resonating hum that carries effortlessly across the silent room. It is not a shout. It is a command that bends the reality of the syndicate. From the shadows near the entrance, Luca, Dante's chief investigator, steps forward. He is accompanied by 24 elite Medici guards. They move with absolute, terrifying precision. They do not draw their weapons, but their sudden, overwhelming presence instantly changes the architecture of the gathering. The guests realize they are no longer at a celebration. They are trapped in a cage with a predator. "Lock the doors," Dante orders softly. The heavy, metallic thud of the iron deadbolts, sliding into place, echoes through the ballroom like the final nail being driven into a coffin. The courtier flinches violently at the sound. He looks frantically around the room, searching for his father, Don Corsi, the patriarch of their family. Don Corsi is standing near the far wall, his face a mask of pure, sickening dread. He knows better than to intervene. He knows that stepping forward to defend his son now would mean the absolute annihilation of his entire bloodline. He watches the destruction unfold in silent, agonizing complicity. Dante returns his gaze to the trembling air. "You believe this room belongs to you," Dante says, his voice a quiet, freezing current that slices through the heavy perfume. "You believe your tailored suit and your father's bank accounts give you the divine right to inflict cruelty upon those you consider beneath you." The heir shakes his head frantically, tears of absolute terror finally spilling over his eyelashes. "No, Don Medici, please. Dante raises a single calloused finger. The heir snaps his mouth shut instantly, choking on his own fear. "You spat on the hands that care for the dead." Dante continues, his voice devoid of any recognizable human mercy. "You humiliated a woman who possesses more honor in her frayed uniform than your entire bloodline has managed to accumulate in a century." Dante slowly rotates the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand. The slow, methodical warning is over. The verdict is about to be delivered. "You are a parasite," Dante whispers, ensuring the entire room hears the absolute condemnation. "And parasites do not feast at my table." He does not order Luca to drag the boy out and shoot him in an alley. Violence would be a brief, merciful end to a boy so deeply arrogant. Dante intends to strip him of the only thing he truly values: his identity, his wealth, and his protection in the underworld. Dante looks up, addressing the silent, paralyzed crowd of dons, politicians, and elites. "The Corsi family," Dante declares, his voice carrying the immovable weight of a falling mountain, "no longer possesses credit in this city. They no longer hold shipping routes in the north. They no longer have a seat at the council table, and their name is no longer protected by the Medici crest." A collective gasp ripples through the ballroom. It is a financial and social execution. In a matter of seconds, Dante has effectively erased a powerful syndicate family from existence. Without Medici protection, the Corsi accounts will be frozen by midnight, their territories seized by dawn, and their enemies will descend upon them like starving wolves before the week is over. The courtier collapses to his knees on the marble floor. The puddle of freezing ice water he had created to humiliate Lucia now soaks into his expensive silk trousers. He is weeping openly, completely broken by the sudden, absolute destruction of his entire reality. "Luca," Dante commands, not even looking down at the ruined boy. "Remove them from my property. They are no longer guests." The Medici guards move swiftly. They grasp the courtier by the arms, dragging him brutally across the polished marble floor. His father, Don Corsi, is escorted out simultaneously, stripped of his dignity and his power, a silent ghost walking into his own demise. The heavy oak doors are unlocked for a brief, violent moment, then slammed shut again, sealing the room. Dante turns his attention back to Lucia. The elderly woman is still shivering, overwhelmed by the impossible scale of the destruction she has just witnessed. She had spent her entire life trying to remain invisible, and the Don of Florence had just burned a rival family to the ground, simply to defend her honor. "You will not clean floors anymore, Lucia," Dante says softly, his tempestuous eyes softening entirely as he looks down at her. "Your uniform is retired." He looks out over the silent, terrified crowd of elites. From this moment forward, Lucia is the head housekeeper of the Palazzo Medici. Dante announces, elevating her status with absolute, unquestionable authority. "She manages the staff, she holds the keys to my private residence, and any man or woman who fails to show her the respect she deserves will answer directly to me." He releases her hand gently. "Go to the East Wing," Dante tells her quietly. "My staff will prepare a suite for you. You are safe now." Lucia nods, the tears flowing freely down her lined face. She turns and walks away, her head held high, leaving the freezing puddle of ice water behind forever. Dante stands alone in the center of the ballroom. The chandelier light catches the heavy gold of his signet ring. The elites of Florence stare at him, a profound, terrifying understanding settling over them. The Lion of Florence had not just protected a janitor. He had reminded them all that power without honor is nothing but noise. And he will not tolerate noise in his city. The heavy mahogany doors of the grand ballroom remain sealed, but the illusion of untouchable wealth inside has fundamentally shattered. The string quartet does not dare to lift their bows. The hundreds of elite guests, the politicians, the rival dons, and the heirs who believed their trust funds made them immortal stand completely paralyzed in the suffocating silence. They stare at the puddle of melting ice and dirty water left on the pristine marble floor. It is no longer just a mess left by a janitor. It is a terrifying monument to their own fragile existence. Dante Medici did not fire a single weapon tonight. He did not raise his voice to a shout. Yet, with a few quietly spoken words, he executed the entire future of a powerful bloodline right in front of their eyes. He stripped the Corsi family of their shipping routes, their credit, and their fundamental right to exist in the Florentine underworld. He taught the room a lesson written in absolute, irreversible ruin. The elites of the city finally understand the terrifying architecture of Dante's moral code. They realize that the tailored suits and the imported champagne are nothing but a fragile veneer. True power is not the ability to humiliate those who cannot fight back. True power is the absolute, unyielding discipline to protect the vulnerable from the dark. Dante does not address the crowd again. He does not need to offer any further explanation. He turns his back on the blinding light of the crystal chandeliers and the sickening, heavy scent of excessive French perfumes. He begins to walk slowly toward the private, shadowed corridors of the palazzo. The heavy atmosphere of ancient cedar, expensive leather, and the metallic aroma of his cold cigar smoke follows him, leaving the ballroom to suffocate in the terrifying reality of his rule. As he walks through the quiet halls of his fortress, Dante looks down at his right hand. He slowly rotates the heavy gold signet ring on his ring finger. The cold metal grinds against his scarred skin. For the first time in 2 agonizing years, the phantom pain of his son's death does not feel like a freezing, empty void. It feels like a shield. Lucia, the invisible woman with the scarred hands who tended Marco's grave in the freezing dawn, is safe. She will never kneel on a wet marble floor again. He had burned a dynasty to the ground to protect a janitor, and in doing so, he had honored the ghost of his child. The balance of his soul, fractured by a fever he could not stop, has found a small measure of profound, quiet peace. But in the criminal underworld, an act of absolute justice is always the catalyst for absolute chaos. Humiliation is a venom that poisons the blood, and desperation is the mother of atrocities. Outside the impregnable stone walls of the Palazzo Medici, the freezing rain begins to fall on the dark cobblestone streets of Florence. Don Corsi and his arrogant heir have been cast out into the cold night. They have no guards, no secure accounts, and no protection under the Medici crest. They are bleeding in the water, and the sharks of the syndicate are already circling to tear them apart. A man who has lost his empire overnight does not simply accept his demise with grace. He becomes a cornered animal, willing to make deals with the devil to survive. In the darkest, forgotten alleys of the city, far from the elegant waltzes and the crystal glasses, Don Corsi makes a desperate choice. He cannot fight the Lion of Florence directly, but he possesses the one thing more dangerous than money. He possesses the intimate knowledge of the Medici supply lines. He knows the blind spots in the northern ports, and he knows exactly which exiled, brutal faction in the deep south has been waiting a decade for the gates of Florence to open. The Corsi family has traded their honor for vengeance. The seeds of a new, catastrophic war are being planted in the dark, watered by the tears of an arrogant heir who did not know how to respect the silence of a janitor. Dante Medici has protected his conscience, but the flames he ignited in the ballroom will soon threaten to consume the entire city. Power without honor is just noise. If you value loyalty above gold, sign up. Stay loyal.